In 1927, at the age of 32, Buckminster Fuller undertook a scientific experiment with himself as both experiment, experimenter, and experimented upon, to determine what one individual, starting out penniless, unknown, and uncredited, could do to, and I quote, lastingly improve the physical protection and support of all human lives, at the same time removing undesirable restraints and improving individual initiatives of any and all humans aboard planet Earth, committing all his productivity potential towards dealing comprehensively with our whole planet Earth. Metaphysics. In the developing sciences of ecology and total systems management, he has contributed to the Tensegrity Dome, the World Game, and a stream of books, some of which, like operating manuals for Spaceship Earth and Synergetics, are already considered classics in many quarters, and all of which challenge, provoke, and develop not only the intellect and emotion, but also the attention. In the midst of this, Buckminster Fuller has remained a mensch, a real person with his interest in his personal life, friends, boating, flying, and modeling unabated. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce Buckminster Fuller.
I'm very grateful I'm here with you, and particularly the talk we had this morning before lunch. At 87, I am busy and I accumulate things I'd like to read. I find myself having less and less time to acquire what I've seen to be important, not only information, but understandings of humans and the universe. I thought this morning Dr. Klube's talk was absolutely magnificent, comprehensive, incisive. My hearing is bad. I heard every word. Just beautiful. So I long for such things to happen in my life, and they don't very often happen to have such a talk as that. And he spoke about the fact that humans tend to, if you think about our solar system is independent of the rest of the extraordinary knowledge we have of astronomy. I find humanity prone to exempt our Earth from the solar system, and worse than that, to continually just overemphasize one nation and so forth, overemphasize just self. Anyway, that was a very inspiring moment today. I really, when it came away, really, things I've been longing to have explained to me were explained, and particularly in the anti-entropic reorganizing by nature of energies in orderly ways. The short time that I'll have with you, I'd like to do I'll spontaneously select out what I think the most relevant of all the things we can talk about humans and the universe, which is the only subject I really care about, and about what I assess to be our position in evolutionary history right now. I think there's a great possibility that there really was a very powerful conspiracy that occurred at the time of Ptolemy, which he himself was a victim, to really alter the cosmology, deliberate attempt to alter cosmology, and arrange it in such a manner that it would reflect or really place great power in that of the military power of becoming the Roman Empire. I'm a student of mathematics historically, and the Babylonians were well into spherical trigonometry, and we suddenly have a reversion to just plain geometry instead of looking at the whole, looking at a surface. I'm going to give you my own very swift reason for feeling that this great conspiracy did not only occur but became extraordinarily effective, what we call the Dark Ages. Certainly, earliest my knowledge of human life expectancy was very low order. We have an Alexander the Great, powerful man at 16. I think life expectancy in early Egypt would be about 19 years of age. And the years that you did live were going to be in great pain. And it was spontaneously assumed by society that life was so bad that it was simply a test for getting you into the next world. So you had to have two universes. And life was so fundamentally unhappy that you assume that really only the Pharaoh could get over. And if you get the Pharaoh over there because he's your leader, he might get you over there with him. So you realize the extraordinary amount of thievery goes on, and you want to be sure the Pharaoh had all the things he would need when he gets over there, or he's going to get you over there too. So you're going to bury all the things you're going to need under a great pile of stone. I want you to think just for a minute or so structurally. If you often take a stick, I'm sure, a large pole, and balance it in your finger. You put that pole on the ground, it's going to tip over. It can tip anyway. But if you have two poles and they happen to go towards each other, a couple of branches at the top, they'll catch on each other. Now they can only act as a hinge instead of following anyway. If I had two such hinges and they fall towards each other, you get the outline of the pyramid. In other words, the pyramid is the most untoppable pile of stones you can get. It's a brilliant piece of design that way, and I don't think it had any other motives in its design than just to be the most untoppable pile of stone you could get. Anyway, in order to be able to get the Pharaoh over there, it took a great genius to know how to move all those blocks of stone there. And it took great genius to think about and discover the liver. It took great genius to realize you take enormous thousands of people and make great ramps of earth and rock. It took another genius to see that you can take two poles, round poles, strip them, make tracks, and take another pole, roll on them, and you use your lever. Pretty easy to see how they got the stones there. But it took a series of geniuses in this world doing a scaffolding in this world to get you in the next world. Just trying to understand that. So that as each of the pharaohs died, there remained in this world that know-how, this new know-how, the scaffolding technology in this world. They've accumulated to such an extent. They said, we not only can take care of getting the pharaoh in the next world, but we can take care of getting all the great nobles in too. So that's brought in more and more geniuses and more designing going on, more and more scaffolding technology in this world. Gradually there's so much technology capability that, say, we can take care of the rich middle class, and it brings you into the Roman and the Greek history of the individual mausoleums of the powerful families. Finally, such accumulation of technology, you get to your Buddha and Christ and Muhammad saying, we take care of everybody. Get everybody in the next world. So this brought about an enormous amount of temple building and every kind of because all the time the priests are running the show. They're telling you about the next world and how you get in there. They're the authority in how you get there, so that everybody wants to get in the next world and they're paying attention to the priests. This is a time when following Alexander the Great, enormous empire, the Roman Empire to the west, develops. And they find themselves not being respected at all by the people. I find that people in the Colosseum and wild animals eat them up. The papers then say, "Tough luck, Mr. Emperor, you're going to hell, I'm going to heaven. Let the animals come on quickly." So, the emperors decided to handle this situation. So this is when I think that this coincides with Ptolemy. And there's a deliberate changing of the way of thinking, because between 400 and 200 BC, there are 4 Pythagorean Greek scientists, philosophers, who very clearly were comprehending the solar system. Some totally, not as an individual, but the 3 of them together seem to spell out the solar system very clearly. And by 200 BC, we have extraordinary Eratosthenes' measuring of the circumference of the Earth. We have modeled a globe of the Earth. So what was undertaken was, first place, to set up an authority that the Son of God said very clearly that the emperor was Holy Roman Emperor, was representative of God, and said you obviously couldn't have the Earth going around the sun, because then the sun would be headquarters. There'd been a great propensity in history for people to identify God with the sun. Everybody can see that the sun goes around us, can't they? We're the headquarters, the universe. And not only the headquarters of the universe, the sun going around us, but it's a flat Earth going to infinity. We can't have it in that spherical kind of way of thinking at all. And being a flat Earth going, anybody can see it's flat. Anybody can see it goes on and out like this. There was no knowledge of the explorers yet of any edges of the Earth. Anyway, quite clearly anybody could see it, and they said all the perpendiculars to the Earth are parallel to one another. All the trees, the people. So they're only 2 directions, up and down. And we're controlled with the up traffic. So you ascend into heaven. The only thing I was really shocked by our lecturer today, he spoke about up there, instead of out there. Because there's no up and down in the universe. And if you're still using up and down, you're absolute victims of the Dark Ages. I'm sure you are. And you're going to find, before I get through with you, how much a victim you are. They were tremendously afraid of any observations being made, and astronomers get right in trouble with the system. We get to a point where there's a breaking away. We do get that extraordinary time when, incidentally, get an idea of how thorough they were to be sure that you would get nowhere. They gave you Roman numerals. If you ever try to do any calculation of Roman numerals, you can't get nowhere. It's impossible for human beings to calculate anything. All they do is add a 1-for-1 matching system. So it's only because all the way from the Pacific in India via North Africa that the cipher got back into the game, and that made possible Copernicus making the calculation he did. And that's where our breakthrough begins to occur. Now, for a moment, I'm going to drop that subject, but I just want to introduce that. I feel absolutely clear that, for instance, it's amazing in Euclidean geometry, these wonderful thinking Greeks started with plane geometry. It's a surface. So the teacher went to the board and taught you and said, a triangle is an area bound by a closed line of 3 edges, 3 angles. An area, square is an area bound by a closed line of 4 edges, 4 equal edges, 4 equal angles. What we were taught was always areas bound by a closed line. Why? On the other side of the line, the plane went to infinity. The teacher told you it went to infinity. So you couldn't define it. You could only define on one side of the line. So this introduces a society incredible bias of only looking one side of the line, my side. my little area that I recognize. Anyway, it's very difficult to see how humanity could have gone and played such a game. Anyway, I've had many students say to me, that seems to be reasonable to me, plain geometry. I've learned my plain geometry and everything added up all right. And I say to that student, please draw me a triangle. And he said, where should I do it? I said, go, that's outdoors and you draw it on the earth. So he draws I say, you're drawing a closed line on our earth, the planet Earth. I'm going to take a big one you're very familiar with. It's a closed line we call the equator. And you draw a closed line on a planet, on a sphere. You divide the surface into two areas, the northern and southern hemisphere. Go way up to 80 degrees north latitude and draw a lesser circle. You divide the total surface of the Earth into two areas, one enormous southern, rather small northern. So now I'm going to go right to the North Pole with you, and I want you to draw your triangle on the snow right around you. And you divide the total surface of the Earth into two areas, an enormous southern one and a very small northern. You draw a very large triangle. The lines of that the rest of the Earth is bound by a closed line of 3 angles. He said, the sums of the angles of triangles always add up to 180 degrees. I said, they never do. You've been taught that at school. That's part of the Black Ages. I'm going to give you now, in dealing with spheres and so forth, we have to deal with spherical trigonometry. We have something we call a great circle. A great circle is a line formed on the surface of a sphere by a plane going through the center of the sphere. The equator is a great circle. The meridians are longitude of great circles. But the latitudes are not. They're parallel. They don't go through the center. We also note that great circles are the shortest distance between points in the surfaces of the spheres. And we're interested in most economical relationships. Nature always tries to find most economical. So I'm going to go up to take a 12-inch globe, and I'm going to take a pair of dividers and put it on the North Pole, and the other end of the dividers on 80 degrees north latitude. And I'm going to lock the dividers to that size. Then you come down to the equator. One end of the dividers on the equator and strike that same circle. So you see a little bit of a circle superimposed on the equator. The little circle crosses equator A and B. And much shorter distance between A and B on the equator, which is a great circle, it is to take the detour of the little circle. I want you to really feel at all times, all spherical trigonometry is always done with great circles. We go even further in what I call geodesics. Geodesics are then the most economical relationship between events in a universe where nothing's standing still. I use then automatically, I'm using chords of great circles because they're shorter than the arcs. Anyway, that's what geodesic domes are made out of, triangles out of these geodesic chords. Always of great circles. Now, next thing. I say this, my boy, then. I'm going to want you to take a 12-inch globe. I want to go up to the North Pole. I want you to take a great circle, which is a meridian, and go hit the equator. You hit it perpendicularly, inherently by spinning of the equator around that axis. So you now leave the meridian and start walking the equator. You leave it at 90 degrees, and you go 1/4 way around the Earth. Then take a meridian again, leave it at 90 degrees, and go back to the North Pole. Because you've been 1/4 way around the Earth. At the North Pole, it's 90 degrees. So 90, 90, 90, that's 270. A very real triangle, the most economically done on a very real Earth. And this is some of the angle of 270, not 180. If you bisect the edges of that triangle, interconnected, you're going to get angles of about 73 degrees in each corner. Bisect the smaller triangle still, get corners about 63 degrees. Bisect, they keep approaching 60, but they never get there. We never get 180. All triangles in the universe are something other than 180. If you want to use that limit, fine, but it cannot be realized. Now, in the Greek geometry, which seems so pleasing to be able to prove something, I love my geometry because my handwriting was very bad at school, and I wasn't very attractive to look at, cross-eyed kid. So the teacher didn't favor me very much, but I could get my geometry. Nobody could say I was wrong in my geometry, so I could get an A. Everything else I got E in. So I love my science for this reason. Now, next thing I want to get at with you is the fact that the Euclidean geometry dealing with the plane, the Earth is so big, it didn't occur to people to think about it. The Earth has insideness. They didn't think this is a plane going to infinity. There was hell if we went the other too far in here. Better not go too there. I find very surprising today how little society realizes the neatness of our cognition and our thinking, our imagination. Very important to remind you and everybody else that no human being has ever seen outside themselves. We see entirely in our television set inside the brain. We have this thing called imagination. And we have our senses continually feeding the brain and giving us information about an otherness. You see every child going around touching everything. You say, can't that child keep his hands off it? The child is getting this information, want to be sure this stuff really is out there, because it really is aware of the brain side. But by the time you're age, my age, you think you see me standing over here, and you don't. You look at me in your brain. It's very, very important to recall that. Now, there is, as far as I can see, life begins with awareness of otherness. No otherness, no awareness. And in this awareness of otherness, this is something absolutely fundamental about what I just said earlier. There's always an insideness and an outsideness. Any cognition, any imagination relates to confirmations that have insideness and outsideness. I would call a system. And the system, all of our thinking is systemic. And our system always divides all the universe into all the universe outside the system, all the universe inside the system, and a little bit of the universe which the system does the dividing. There's this in fundamental case we have to develop a macrocosm and a microcosm. You're a great macrocosm today. There is then a relevant externalness, and there's a relevant internalness, but then there's an irrelevant micro and an irrelevant macro. This is what in electronics we simply tune in. It's a program we have tuned in. All of our experiences are considered, the very words consider, bringing stars together in a pattern, are always in systemic. I find that the minimum system, dividing universe inside and outside, would be take 2 points have between us, 3 points have, not to have 4 points have between insideness and outsideness. So the minimum confirmation, anything imaginable image ability, the minimum image is tetrahedron. And so here is minimum system in the universe. There are lots of things very important about it. It's interesting that in Linus Pauling, his Nobel laureate in chemistry, reviewed the history of organic chemistry, which begins about 1800 in importance, when they noted the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 continually showed up. By 1825, a man named Butereff in Paris said that the 1 is 2, and 3, and 4 was to do with bonds, univalent, bivalent, trivalent, quadrivalent. 35 years later came a man named Van Hoff. And Van Hoff said he felt that deeply intuitively that the 4-ness, 1, 2, 3, and 4 had to do with the tetrahedron. And they called him every kind of possibility. At this point, physics and chemistry were saying there are no models. There are formulas. There's no such thing as a model. The model is absolutely unreliable. And here was this man, Van Hoff, saying tetrahedron. He lived, luckily, to be able to give optical proof of the tetrahedral configuration of carbon, was the first chemist to receive the Nobel Prize. But they haven't heard about that over in geometry yet or over in physics. We're so specialized. But anyway, tetrahedron is not taught in any of the schools. You may accidentally get into platonic solids as a student of your own interest, but not taught. So here's the minimum system in the universe. Must be terribly important. Next thing. Now, if you could move that water away, I never use it. Be safer. Now, our building comes out so much of the ancient, early Mesopotamian. We get into Egypt, Greece, we have marble, and marble was solid. And that's all. Plato had his solids. Plato's solids. Today we know there's no such thing as a solid. There's absolutely no impervious continuum. But the atom, the electron is as remote from the nucleus as is the Earth from the moon in relative diameters. So we have very false ideas about structure. I have my mother's necklace, and it fascinates me due to its flexibility. And I find that in all the flexing, the sticks are not bending, and they're not getting shorter or longer. So whatever is providing the change in pattern is in the corners, these tension and compression. In all structure, there are two fundamentals always going on in all universe: tension and compression. And they're always known to coexist. If I pull on a rope, purposely I'm tensing it, it gets tauter, which means that in its girth it goes into compression. So I inadvertently produce compression at 90 degrees from my tensing. But they're always known to coexist, like concave and convex, always known to coexist. You can't have one without the other. And convex diffuses radiation, concave concentrates it, so they're obviously not the same. Where we have unity is plural and a minimum two in our universe, which must be the essence of all quantum mechanics. Because you can't have quantum mechanics, you're dealing with the total amount of energy of the universe, and you can't increase it. So all multiplication has to be by division. So you can't have quantum mechanics unless you have unity is plural, minimum two. Systemically, it is more than two. Anyway, here's this necklace, and I want to, as a child now, seeing the sticks are not providing the flexibility, I'm going to get rid of some sticks. I'll take out, let's say, 2 sticks here. Put it together again, still the necklace. I'll take out some more. Still the necklace. Take out another one. Remember when the teacher went to the blackboard and said that's a square? The only reason to say square because the blackboard held it there. There is no such thing as a square. You can define a triangle as 3 points, but you can't guarantee two triangles hinged together. There's no such thing as a square. Pretty serious. We teach about this square, style of squares. I'm going to take out one more. I can't take out two more because there won't be a hole anymore. It won't be a necklace. This is the last case of being a necklace. Hold the shape! Wow! I'm just a child, but I see a lot of shapes that I recognize. I realize anything to hold a shape must go back to a triangle. It has to be there. So, then I see I have here the minimum system in the universe is all triangular. So it's a minimum structural system in the universe. There it is, very simply confronting us. Now, the next thing about this is that I found that physics and engineering considered axiomatic. The structure was axiomatic because of the marble. Things held their shape as they cut out. So that they didn't have to define structure. I found that physics and engineering had no definition of structure. So I said, this consists of 6 parts. 3 rubber joints. There's rubber, and there's wood. So what I mean by structure now is a complex of events that interact to produce a stable pattern. And this is the only thing that will do it. So this becomes then my minimum structural system in the universe. I find then, while I could get This minimum system not only has 4 corners, it has 4 nothings opposite the 4 somethings. But it has 6 interconnections. And you can't have a minimum structural system with less than 6 edges. These are push-pulls. They're both pushing and pulling the tension conversion I gave you. To have a minimum structural universe with tetrahedron requires 6 vectors. These are our vectors. They have their energy investment, and their length can represent their need, velocity, and the mass operating in a given direction. So here then takes minimum of 6 vectors, push-pulls, so they're really 12, to give you a minimum system. I want you to think about a wire wheel. We used to have what we call artillery wheels, which were thick, heavy column spokes. And you could, first of all, in other words, the wheel kept giving you a new pole to roll along on. When you have a wire wheel with a very thin rim, and one wire from the top, your hub is suspended from the top of that wheel, obviously it oval down, you couldn't roll it along. So you'd like to be able to roll it along, you try to have 2 more. You divide the wheel into 3 parts, 120 degrees. But when you do that, you find your hub in the middle of 3 tensions. It acts like a drumhead, oscillates through. So that'd be a very unstable wheel. So you take the 3 of them and separate them into 6. And it's 6 and 6 because you like to divide up the rim, unsupported length of the rim, more and more. So you have 6 divisions of the rim, and 3 of these on this side, the hub, 3 on the other side of the hub, keep it from oscillating. Then you discover they're coming in perpendicular to the hub, and leaves a trapezoid, and trapezoid is unstable. So you take all 6 and divide them into 12 now, and have 2 coming in, they have 6 coming in the front side of the hub, and on the rear side, so it can't torque. Finally, it takes 12 spokes to have a stable wheel. They're always there in the universe. They're 12 degrees of freedom. I don't know whether you use these, sir, in your work, but I find it absolutely essential to understand all structuring and interpositioning to pay attention to those 12 degrees of freedom. Now, I have then, if I'm going to call, in order to hold its shape, it has to have those 6 vectors, and each one, it says, a push-pull, so it's double, there are 12 represented. I'm going to call that one, to take all the degrees of freedom to stabilize the structure of a system. I'm going to call that one quantum of structure, the 6 positives, 6 negatives. I can also produce a system, divide all the universe inside and outside, and all triangulated in what we call the octahedron. And it has 4 vectors coming together at the corner, and this has only 3. I can also divide the whole of the universe into 2 parts, inside and outside, all triangulated with the icosahedron. It has 5 vectors coming to each vertex. I can't have 6 equilateral triangles around a point, be a plane going to infinity, and never come back itself to close off a system. There are only 3 possible systems in the universe: tetrahedron, octahedron, icosahedron. I find all crystallography, all biology, all biological formation, everything comes back to these 3. Incidentally, you know when you're eating? You know how your ears going now? Well, you're going to handle a skull to do that. Now, the octahedron has 12 edges. So that's 2 times 6. So there are 2 quanta here. The icosahedron has 30 edges. Divide by 6 is 5. There's 5 cents there. And when I take the tetrahedron and bisect its edges, as we quantum multiplying by division, I bisect the edges of the tetrahedron and interconnect them. I get the octahedron in there. You have 4 hidden corners inside the 4-corner tetrahedron. and you have the four triangles, the four faces that show, and that's the octahedron in there. When you double the linear dimension, you increase the surface 2 to the second power and volume 2 to the third power. So when I have a tetrahedron, octahedron here, corner take away 4 corner tetrahedron from the big tetrahedron. I'm taking the 4 away from 8, leaves the octahedron's volume of 4. So when their edges are equal in length and the vectors are the same, tetrahedron has a volume of 1, octahedron has a volume of 4. I'm getting 4 volumes for 12 structures. Or I'm getting 2 for 1. I get 1 for 1 here, and I get 2 for 1. Now icosahedron again, almost 4, 3.81 volumes for 5. Otherwise, for each one. In other words, my volume is almost 20, and I'm using 30 struts or 5 sets. So we get by far the most volume with the least structural investment in the icosahedron. Next thing. Incidentally, things I'm saying to you are all very relevant to what I undertook to do in 1927, 55 years ago, when I was experimenting to see what an unknown individual which you introduced me as, absolutely penniless, might be able to do effectively on behalf of all humanity that would be inherently impossible for political states or great private enterprise to do, if anything. So I found that the great political states were interested in their political state, and none of them represented a very large portion of the surface of the earth. Russia by far the largest, 4%. I saw that great enterprise the ship had to come in in a given amount of time or they could lose their bet. There were things that were going to take longer than the enterprise could endure. I saw that, luckily I'd been a regular United States naval officer. I was used to dealing in the 71% of the Earth's surface with water. I said there's nothing to stop me thinking about total planet Earth and total known resources and total known accumulative know-how and how to use the total resources to make this ship work for everybody. Later on I gave the name Spaceship Earth, which came very logically. But I've been operating for 55 years now only in the terms of a total planet Earth, so that's the way my thinking goes. In order to I said I won't get anywhere then with politics. There are over 2 billion people when I started this. I said my life expectancy was only 10 more years. If you were born when I was 1895 in New England, the life expectancy was 42 and I was already 32. So I said, I get nowhere asking anybody to listen to me. People don't listen to you unless they ask you to talk to them. And the only way I'll get anywhere is to pay attention to the invention of humans in the universe. Trying to find out if I can, how at least have a good working assumption of why we're here. And if I were then to try to abet the design of the universe, including humans, I might find myself being very effective. And particularly the fact that we're 60% water, and water freezing below very small limits, and that we would not be able to live in any other planet we know of, but just a particular biosphere is absolutely extraordinarily unique for what we have in the way of life. And incidentally, that made me say, you obviously couldn't have God in the form of human beings. You wouldn't be able to get on any planet with the planet Earth and the great heavens. Have to leave the rest of the universe just go to hell. Now, next thing, I was then interested in developing environment controls for human beings that would cope with conditions that they've not been able to cope with up to now. Trying to make the environment more favorable to human beings so they could, if possible, expand into their designed functions. I think you'd probably like to hear from me quickly about what I assumed the function was. I found that human beings differentiated from all other organisms in that all other organisms have some built-in special equipment to give them special advantages in some special environment, whether up your Amazon, some little vine that just goes there. The dog with very short legs, no nose can follow the trail. Birds flying in the sky, they're beautiful wings when they're flying, but when they're not flying, they can't divest themselves of it, so they're greatly hobbled by it as they walk when they walk. And so humans didn't have that kind of thing. Humans were not unique in having brains. Many, many creatures have brains. The brains are always and only coordinating that information, the senses, the smelling, the touching, hearing. They're always responding. Each special case just smells a little different from that. Brains deal with special cases. In special cases, the temporal, and brain deals with the experience of going to sleep because they're cut off. The brains are absolutely inherently limited in temporal. I found human mind had a capability from time to time to discover relationships existing between special cases in no way manifest by any special cases considered only by themselves. I go right into Dr. Kluge's world of the time when Copernicus had now hypothesized that we were one of the planets going around the sun, and great excitation and others. Tycho Brahe acquiring, being a man of great wealth, better instruments to make observations, but not being a mathematician, getting Kepler making extraordinary observations, accuracy, finding all these planets with different sizes, all different distances from the sun, all going around the sun at different rates, seemingly very disorderly. But he said, I know my mathematical enough, I know if I have two knowns, I have a very great advantage. We have one known, absolutely in common, they're all going around the sun. As a mathematician, I can give them something else in common. I can give them the same increment of calendar time, exactly the same. Not just so many hours, days, but they have to start the same day, same minute and a second. And giving this given increment, which is much too short for any large amount of orbiting, the making diagram, the distance from the sun when it starts, distance from the sun at the end, and having the arc, he was able then to have a closed diagram. So I had all the data, so I said, I might as well, I don't know how I'm coming out, but I've introduced this second known, hopefully getting somewhere. I'm going to calculate the areas, and then calculating these areas and finding they were not similar, but they were elegantly the same mathematical area. Quite clearly, you could not coordinate this. You could not come out with the same number as you're coordinating. And they were not touching, if they're touching like gears, you can understand it, but they're millions of miles apart. This brings into play then a realization that something's going on. He said, I know if I have a weight on a string around my head stays in orbit, but let go of it, goes off in a line. There's some kind of tension going on here, an invisible tension between incredibly big bodies operating over millions of miles. And you can't smell it, see it, touch it. Nothing to do with the brain. This is mind, human mind, discovering relationships existing between that in no way evidenceable by any parts considered by themselves. I found human mind then, go on to Galileo's work, we go on to Newton's, his hypothesis of the interaction of these bodies bearing inversely second power of the arithmetical, this is intervening, other astronomers using it, explaining their behaviors. It becomes what we call in a scientific generalization if you find no exceptions. And there were no exceptions is a negative, double negative. So the proper word is eternal. Exceptions is a negative, double negative. So the proper word is eternal. So we find the human mind, brain dealing in the temporal and the mind dealing in the eternal. Extraordinary, these principles. Because principles can't be principles if they're not eternal. One of the things I'd like to get at today as I go on with you is how more and more I'm being overwhelmed by the reality of principle. I'm going to make a small detour on that. In America, I had many, many scholars at different universities say to me, if you ever go to meet Professor so-and-so of Yale, I don't want to use his name, he's going to knock a lot of your theories and very seriously. I was appointed to Yale for a short term as a fellow And immediately the students asked if I'd be willing to meet this professor on the Yale television program. I said I'd be glad to, and we met. And the television people had a big wooden table arranged, and they arranged for the Yale professor to speak first. So he opened by banging the table with his fist and said, "Don't tell me this table isn't solid." I said, "How can you see me?" He said, "What do you mean you're sitting right over there?" I said, "You're looking at me through what you call solid glasses." We went on to explain how this could be. That this was a set of events going on in here. Were very similar if you had a number of airplane propeller blades, very large ones going around very fast. You couldn't see them. But the professor put his hand out there, he could get that thump all right again. Then you could take a machine gun and time it to shoot between those blades. And the speed of light was moving so much faster than these small atomic events that the light was able to get through them. And you have just ticking, a little refraction to give you a correction by somebody, very beautiful control. Anyway, he left the studio and asked him to cancel the program. Luckily for him, it was being taped and not on the air. But I want you to realize what I'm talking about, principles. The principle of frequency, relative frequencies, per se. I find that as time goes on, I get more and more realization that that's all we're really experiencing in these eternal principles. I'm not going to dwell on that too long, but I hope as life goes on with you, you may find yourself inclined in the same direction. Now, the next thing I want to speak about, which was essential to my personal reasoning in 1927. I was 32 years of age. If I was interested in environment control for humanity, I was also fascinated with something I had about my own life. When I was born, reality was everything you could see, smell, touch, and hear. And they always said, "I'm from Missouri, let me see it." The year I was born, the X-ray is discovered. You couldn't see it. The year I was born, Marconi discovered theoretical wireless. You couldn't see it. When I was 3, the electron was isolated. You couldn't see it. Didn't make any newspaper. Nobody thought that's going to be a thing. It's really pretty interesting. As I entered Harvard before World War I, doing very well in physics, but my physics book had yellow pages that had been glued in the back called electricity. As the electron was just intruding itself there. So, from the time I was born, we began to get into an invisible reality. We didn't know it was going to make great ranges. We didn't know much about the electromagnetic spectrum. But we began to get in alloys, got in all kinds of chemistries, electronics. You couldn't see what's going on. It was so visible. Today, 99.9999% of everything's going to affect our lives tomorrow is conducted in the realms of reality, non-directly contactable by the human senses. This is one reason why we're in very great, plus the specialization you talked about. So this specialist knows a lot about his invisible, but he doesn't see the significance in relation to the man next door. So we're incommunicado society is in radio trouble due to the fact it doesn't comprehend this reality. The integrated significance is reality. Particularly as long ago the power structure, I mean human beings who were more physically powerful than others, undertook to just in their innate action that this big man said, "I can lick you, this other big man, but don't let two big men come at me at once. I can handle them one by one." So he had divide to conquer, to keep conquered, keep divided. And he needed a whole lot of little people around, didn't have any muscle, couldn't do that kind of fighting. But he found they were very bright. They could catch on to things. And he needed them, so he made them all specialists. Made the regulars all specialists. That's the very basis of Oxford University. So the power structure is deliberately got society in a specialization, and with this invisibility, we're in a very, very tightly blocked off position right now. Very, very, very dangerous for humanity. not to really know what its options are. And that's why I feel enormous responsibility talking to you, because I've been concerned with total. Because in contradistinction to the specialization of the conventional education, I said I went from Harvard and to the Navy, and then I sent a special course at the Naval Academy time of World War I. Time of World War I, up to World War I, for over a century, the British Empire had been running things. And they'd been only guarding the surface of the sea, and those who were ambitious to displace them said we go underwater and above the water, new geometry. And the success in war is controlling the line of supply. And the British had been controlling the line of supply, and suddenly it was interrupted, and they were about to lose if America hadn't come in on their side. They asked the Americans then to overnight, just 1 year, to rebuild, replace the ships they'd lost. They asked for 1 million men to be trained and armed and delivered 3,000 miles across the Atlantic. All they done in a year. They also, the United States Navy, an inferior Navy, they say the United States Navy must come to parity with the British Navy right overnight. And I was amongst them, the young naval officers being trained not only for wedding with the British, but I was the very last of the era when I was being taught how do you run the world, how to look at it, because this is the control of the great control system. And promotion was by selection and not by the number. When those who were in the great power decided they'd like to move you up in a hurry. They felt that they could trust you with their secrets of how do you run the world. Abraham Lincoln was the first head of state to be wired to his fighting fronts. Up to this time, heads of states had to be present at the critical battles, at the critical fronts. But there were no wires to the Navy. So up to and including World War I, we suddenly had the radio, but we were sure the enemy could break your code and cipher, so anything critical had to go by courier. Couldn't go any faster. The Navy that I was brought up in then, I was what they call an officer of the line, and the training from the very beginning is to know the whole theory of the Navy and how it did then control the lines of supply, to understand every type of ship, to understand every function in the Navy, so you know exactly what admirals do, though you're only a midshipman. You're being trained from the beginning. If you're a senior skill, you move right in his job. You know the job all right. You haven't had as much experience as you have, but they always have you moving up to having the deck. You take the deck for the skipper of the ship. You get to the admiral and you take over the whole fleet for a few hours. So the training is to be comprehensive. It's exactly the opposite of a specialist. I was lucky to get into that extraordinary training. At the end of World War I, they learned to scramble the radio messages. Didn't have, from there on, the authorities centralized in Washington or other capitals, and they went in for specialization from there on. They had naval aviators, submarine men, and so forth. I happened to live at the very last moment when you could really have learned how to be a comprehensivist. I was trained very effectively that way. So when I talk to you the way I talk to you, it's in terms of that kind of a training. I was absolutely, I had a number of very interesting jobs. For instance, I was science and technology consultant on the staff of Fortune magazine doing great corporation stories. I found that all I had to do was to learn my generalizations. If I learned all my generalizations that are thus far discovered in biology, chemistry, and physics, so forth, they'd hold true in every case. There'd be language barriers. There'd be ethnic language barriers. There'd be industrial language barriers, professional language barriers. But break through the language barriers, there's your principle. So I became then very deliberately a comprehensivist, searching as I'm searching here for really understanding structures and so forth, the generalized principles of structure. Now, I became also then, during World War I in the Navy, I became tremendously concerned over the fact that we had this incredible technology. You could float anything out of it, and you had enormous power to operate it, but everything leading up to contact and destruction. So why is humanity using all this beautiful discovery of technical capability leading only to destruction. So I had to really look into this to my satisfaction and went back to the fact that with breaking out of those dark ages, Magellan's trip around the world was suddenly making clear we were on a sphere. We were not on a plane. There were not so many people in on that. The illiteracy of humanity at that time was probably about 98%. Very few people really knew about it, but those who were in the know had power, were tremendously fascinated. And beginning to realize then, because you could have very big ships, get one ship from the Orient to Europe, it made a vast fortune. So, their great ambition is he was going to control the sea lanes. He'll go through 200 years. Queen Elizabeth sets up the East India Company College in 1600, East India Company, and there are competing, those who competed through the French government, through the Spanish government. The power structure just used various governments and used their military mandate to put things together in a very big way technologically. We have battle after battle, Trafalgar, 1805. 200 years after we had founded the sphere, an enormous amount of exploration and discovery had occurred, and you had a very good catalogue of all the information now about whether the various resources on Earth existed. The same year, after Trafalgar, 1805, a few months later, they created the East India Company College, and there they deposited all the data they had from around the sphere, all the vital statistics. So Thomas Malthus was professor of political economics there, and he, going over the data, came out in his book, made it absolutely clear that humanity was increasing its numbers at a geometrical rate and increasing its life support at an arithmetical rate, that humans were bound to go through life great want and pain. Pay all you want, won't do any good, that's all there is. It's a closed system, very different. All that dark ages, you went to infinity. If you went to infinity, there's an infinite number of chances you could be gratified to pray, so praying is worthwhile. Now, we come then to 60. There's still, I imagine very few people ever read Malthus, certainly not contemporarily. This is information only interested those who have enormous ambition to take over the power. 60 years later, we have Darwin's been around the sphere, and he found a closed system, that's all there is, and so forth, and came out with his theory of survival of the fittest, explaining evolution. We have contemporary of his, Karl Marx in England. Karl Marx apparently assumed that both Malthus and Darwin were dealing in closed systems of good science. There's nowhere nearly enough to go around, survival only the fittest. And the worker, Marx doesn't write this out, but I can see how he reasoned that the worker was most fittest to survive because they knew how to handle the tools and nurture the seed. He said the other people are parasites. The other people said we're not parasites. We also go along with Darwin. Survival of the fittest, we're in the fittest. We're on top of the heap for very good reason. The workers are very dull. They have no ambition. What's needed is enormous daring and exploration and data. And therefore we're top of the heap. That's only 100 years ago. And this became the basis of the two great political camps in our planet, of socialism and the capitalism. The last 40 years, we've had Russia and the United States spending over $6.5 trillion, about as a light year of dollars, to buy the capability to destroy all humanity in 20 minutes. All on the basis, misassumption there's not enough to go around.